Hello, welcome to the studio. Today's Bob Ross classic painting is Northern Lights, and the question is, was this our most popular class? Well, it certainly didn't lack any bookings. We always had a full class. So, sit back and relax and paint your version of this Bob Ross classic. Have a cup of tea on hand, maybe something stronger, but definitely have your paints and brushes out. Happy painting, people! So here's my canvas, 16 inches by 20, and I given it a coat of black gesso. I wanted my canvas dark because I'm going to be painting a night scene on it. I've left this to dry completely before covering it in a thin coat of Bob Ross liquid clear oil paint. I'm going to use two 1-inch brushes, an old Bob Ross landscape brush and a nice soft new one as well. I have also got a fan brush, there'll actually be two of those, and a liner brush, and of course a Bob Ross palette knife. For ease of application and storage, I keep my liquid clear in an airtight pot. I drop it in the freezer. It just chills it and stops it drying out. And I'm going to divide my canvas into 4. I do one section at a time, hanging onto the canvas because you're going to really give it a good scrub. The idea is to apply a very, very thin, even coat. If you're not sure how to do that, I have a video all about it, and I'll post a link here in the corner. An easy way to test your canvas is to use a piece of paper towel. Just gently blot the surface. Don't go scrubbing it off, just take off some of the residue. You want to see just a trace. I have a limited palette of colours for today's painting. I'll list down below the colours I'm using. Some of the colours I'll add later on, but first I'm going to start with some phthalo blue. This is a very strong colour, and I want a band of it over on this right hand side. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice I've got some matte pins pushed into the edge of the canvas. This is my horizon line. Above the matte pins will be sky, and below will be water and foreground. The problem is I can't actually tell where the blue is, so I use my fingers. I want to see a nice strong blue colour. If I touch here, you see it's sort of really oily and thin. That won't do at all. So make sure you test and get a good strong blue colour. If you don't have enough, your sky will be grey and lacking in colour. Still using that old 1-inch brush, I want to go into some phthalo green, and I've added a little sap green to it. Bob didn't use sap green in his version of this painting, but I like to add a little touch. It sort of calms the phthalo green down, which can be a bit fluorescent. I want to add this on this section of my sky and down into the water as well. I let the two colours shake hands, blend one into the other. You might also want to put some extra blue over on the left side. Once again, you can see I test my colour, good and strong. So here's my prepared canvas. Time for some planning. I want a mountain and an aurora, but what I really need is some sort of a portable mountain. How about this one? Yep, the props department has made me a mountain on a stick. I can position it where I want it. Not too close to the top, not too low down, not too far to the left. But about a third the way across the canvas, level with the horizon line. For the purpose of the video, I've got a little bit of titanium white on the corner of one of my fan brushes, and I'll just sketch in that rough position, and of course to allow enough room for the aurora. I'll load more paint onto my fan brush and make a few sort of marks where I think the aurora should fit into my painting. I don't want to be too low down nor too high up, but just a nice sort of curl from about a third the way up on the mountain. I'm just going to tap on a line. Top tip here, don't aim for the corner. It's so tempting to be sort of going around in a nice curl and then to go right off the corner of my painting. It always looks a bit strange. I go off the side or the top. I'll bow this one out a little bit further. I think that looks about right, but I can always make a small adjustment here and there. There. I think that's going to work well. Happy with that? I'm going to put on some more white paint, and you can already see it's starting to pick up the colour underneath. Another little tip here is I like to pull a little bit of Indian yellow into my titanium white paint. Again, it makes a small difference, but it makes it all uniquely mine. Now for your bravery test. You want a piece of clean paper towel and that nice soft 1-inch brush. Deep breath and go in with nice firm brush pressure. Really push. I'm going to do just this curl first of all. I'll do the ones above it in just a moment. But you need to really lean on that canvas. Don't be shy. Really give it a good push and pull the paint up. Instantly you'll see that lovely colour starting to emerge. I'll work my way along this aurora, keeping it fairly straight and wiping my brush between each stroke. You can go back over this more than once, but of course every time you do, you dull the aurora slightly. It becomes more green or blue. You just pull more colour into it. But there is a fix, and I'll show you in just a moment if you overdo it. I'll work my way along the aurora. I'm even grabbing some colour from the edge of the mountain I sketched. That's to help you see some of the rest of the painting for the video. Having done that section, I'll work on this little curl. I find if I do one little curl at a time, it stops them all bumping into each other and making a big mess. This way I can pick out each individual curl of my aurora. And finally, this last one. Again, lots of pressure on the brush. I'm not using time lapse for this, I'm doing this in real time for you to show you the whole process. I know this can be quite nerve-wracking and you just have to really grit your teeth and go for it. This area here looks a little bit muddy, so I'm going to go back and just add a little bit more white paint. That's my little fix if you do overbrush an area. You can add more white and then rebrush it. But top tip here, you can only really do this once. If you go back over it several times, it stops losing its green colour and it starts becoming more and more white. But I think 1 or 2 little touch-ups are perfect. I'm going to add a little bit of light colour to this part of my painting. This has been a challenge to film this because painting a dark colour over a black sky you won't see a lot. So I've added just a little bit of highlighting here. But it's optional, you don't need to on your painting. Now, time to paint a mountain. Phthalo blue, black and Van Dyke brown. This is going to be my base colour. I'm going to use this under my mountain and also under my fir trees. I take a small roll of this dark colour, a very blue-black colour, and I'm going to block in my mountain with firm pressure. See how I got my finger on the back of the knife for this stage? I just want to press this down into the painting, get it really deep into the canvas, and scrape off the excess as you go. Top tip here, if you struggle with mountains, the chances are this is one of the most common faults I see. People just leave too much heavy dark paint on the canvas. This colour is only to stain the painting, not to act much more than that. So get tough with that paint and really scrape it off. Now let's make a highlight and a shadow colour. This grubby titanium white, I'm going to take half of it for my shadow side and the other half for my highlight side. It doesn't need to be clean white, in actual fact the grubbier the better sometimes. I'll put a little phthalo blue on the shadow side, this side as it is. Take a small even roll of paint, that's another top tip, and lightly touch the canvas. Notice where I hold my knife, around that silver bezel. Kick the handle out, touch gently and then glide down the mountain, aiming for the pin on the right with my handle. This is a smooth sweeping action and one that takes a little practice. So, if you don't get it right the first time, just stroke over it a couple more times. Worst comes to worst, just scrape it off, redarken the mountain and have another go. Another top tip here is don't over highlight the mountain. Remember, this is supposed to be a nighttime scene. So leave lots of lovely dark mountain colour peeking through. Let's add a little bit to this peak here, as though it's just hiding behind that main peak. And I think once we've done that, we can use some of that shadow colour. Again, take a small roll, probably half the size of the highlight roll, and I like to come up behind my highlights on that right side and just give them a little bump with the back of the knife blade, give it a little push and pull to the left. Again, aim with the handle so you're going off the side of the canvas, not straight down. That's it. Again, leave lots of lovely dark poking through. You might also notice that sometimes I push that highlight colour out the way. If I make a line that's too straight, I can just push it over a little bit. I see a nice dark area here. Maybe I could squeeze something in. Another mountain peak maybe. Cool, that was a bit of luck, wasn't it? Maybe even a little adjustment here and there as well. Get used to playing with your mountains. The more confident you become with a palette knife, the better they get. But it takes practice, and it took me a while to learn. So don't be disheartened if it takes you a couple of goes. Now, let's add some misty effects to the base of this mountain. I'm going to pick up my nice brush and again just tap out some of that sort of stray paint that's come across the base of the mountain. I'll tap up into the base of the mountain, picking up some of the shadow and the highlight colour, and then soften it all up with a few upward strokes. I want this to look nice and misty. Now for some distant fir trees. I got so excited I forgot to turn the camera on for these ones. But all I did was use my fan brush to put on a few little markers. I used that little bit of a pale colour behind to make these ones show up. The markers keep me on track and they keep me in position so I don't grow them too big. I use the top corner of my fan brush with a sort of a downward stroking action. I grow a few bigger ones in the background, and these ones I might add a little extra detail to, maybe a few little side branches. Again with the corner of the fan brush. I'll do some bigger trees later on so you can see the technique a bit better. I've switched back to my highlighting fan brush with the light colour on it, and just at the base of these trees I use a sort of pressing action just to sort of stab in a little bit of snowy highlight. A little upward push, sort of looks like some grasses or some distant vegetation, all frosty and lovely. I also like to use the very tip of my fan brush just to do a few little upward flicks. It makes it look as though there's some very distant tree trunks at the base of those trees and lots of sticks and twigs. Time for some reflections. I've picked up my dry cleaned nice brush and I'm just going to grab that edge of the land we just put in, that little frosty effect, and just grab firm pressure, really push and drag and pull down. I don't think I've got quite enough paint on my brush here from that, so I've just added a bit from my palette. But again, push and pull down. Then, using the side of my brush, which is nice and soft, I want to just gently brush across. I'm going to go backwards and forwards, left and right, and see if I can make my reflections look like they've got a bit of a wobble in them. Yeah, I think I got that technique just right. But be very careful when you approach the land. You don't want to be grabbing any of that little soft vegetation we made. Yeah, a wobble. I'm going to tap my knife into some of that grubby white paint. For my water lines, firm pressure, keep the knife level, and push and slide and leave a little tiny line of paint between the land and its reflections. Time to paint the foreground and a bit more planning. I've got a small amount of white on my fan brush, and this is the area that I want to be the land. I'll put some bushes on the edges and some nice fir trees at the side to frame the mountain. I've turned the brightness up on my video so you can see where I paint my fir trees. I put in a centre line using my fan brush as though I was doing those little background trees, and then just on the corner of the brush I tap to create the centre of the fir tree. Nice and dark. And then I can grow a few outward branches. I'm sorry this is very difficult to see, but that's the problem when I'm painting a dark painting on a black background. I've done some more fir tree videos and I'll put some links to them up in the top right hand corner. You'll see these a little bit better when I put some highlight on them. Let's finish these off with a bit of time lapse. Let's give our fir trees a little frosty highlight. I've picked up my light colour fan brush and I've just pushed into a little bit of that off-white colour again. The light is coming from the right, so that's the side that's going to see most of this highlight. And just touch the very edges of those outward facing branches. The centre of the tree gets a little less highlight, and on the left hand side I keep it in deep shadow. Let the paint run out as you get to the bottom of the tree. I want to be able to put some bushes down there and make them show up. Let's add a touch of highlight to those little background trees while we're here. For the bushes I'm going back to my original 1-inch brush, the old one. Notice it has a rounded side to it, which is the direction I'm going to load the paint. It's also the direction of which I'm going to apply the paint to the canvas. Groom your brush in one direction, rounded side forwards, to load a generous amount of paint onto the brush. Give it a little push. This will create a lovely sticky underpainting for the highlights. Now I know you can't see it because it's dark on dark again, but I have an idea. Maybe I can use the corner of my palette to demonstrate the brush stroke. So rounded side to the top, imagine you're pressing onto the canvas and you're pushing out from the centre. Don't let the brush skid, just let the bristles splay, then pop back into the centre again. You create this lovely explosion of colour. I sometimes call them turkey bushes because they look like a turkey tail. And I'm going to stab these into my canvas and I'll come back and highlight them using the same technique. For the highlights I use my nice brush, the one with the soft bristles on it, and I just pull it gently through the paint in one direction and give it a little push. You want that sort of a pattern, a stippled effect, and the bristles on the brush each have a little tiny dot of paint on them. Now, rounded side to the top, and this time very gentle. You just want to touch the canvas. The dark sticky underpainting colour will grab this highlight. There. I'll do one little bush at a time, reloading frequently. If your brush clogs up with paint, stop and give it a good dry clean. This technique only works with brushes that are nice and open and lacy. The biggest challenge is not going back over them twice or 3 times. Try to somehow improve them. They always end up looking slightly overpainted, so resist if you can. This little gap here, well, I've got something in mind for that. I think we'll put a cabin in the painting, so I won't over highlight that bit. So we're almost there. Just have to pop on a cabin and make a cup of tea. What do you mean? You're going to chicken out now? No cabin? Just draw one on a piece of paper and then you can scratch the design on the canvas. If you're not happy with it, you can simply add the vegetation again and scratch it out a second time. I did this one twice. So, carry on painting a cabin. My top tip for cabins is make a sketch first. Draw one the right size for your painting. You can hold it against your canvas and judge things perfectly. You can make as many mistakes as you like on the drawing and then just transfer it carefully over to your painting. You can see I made quite a few mistakes on this one until I got it looking right. Now, let's scratch in the centre line first, about here. The front of the cabin is like a big arrow, and as you saw, this distance is the same width as the blade of my knife. That was a bit of luck, wasn't it? Now, simply scratch out your cabin section by section. The big arrow on the front first, square it up, keep offering your picture up to the scraped out design, and the good thing is if you don't like what you scraped out, you can always re-highlight this area. Put a few more touches of highlight back with the nice 1-inch brush and then scrape it out again. You can do it as many times as you like. You can see from my painting that I wasn't that happy with my first attempt, so I highlighted the area again and had another attempt. Let's put some snow on the roof. This, I think, is one of the hardest things people find to do. My top tip is start off by putting a little roll of paint across the ridge of the roof, that's the very top part, and another little roll of paint down at the eaves. So you now know where to start and stop with the snow. That's it, one nice stroke. Let's put the reverse side on while we're here. And now that one nice stroke. I want an even, smooth stroke with the knife. And don't worry too much about any little holes here and there. It's a rustic cabin and snow melts. And you can all stop holding your breath. You were, weren't you? I'm going to make some old wooden planks for the side of my little cabin. And for this I need a marble mix. Van Dyke brown onto the right, dark Sienna on the left, and a light colour through the centre. I always divide my dark colours up with a light colour. It gives me a better marble mix, I find. Take a small round roll of that paint and just touch. I go up and bump that little eave and just drag my knife down and see what happens. It's a bit of a lucky dip. I drag my knife over it 2 or 3 times and that pulls out all those little extra colours. I'll do one on the other side as well. I'm going to try and keep the face of my cabin, the side I'm working on now, slightly brighter than the side. I think that's a little more in shadow, so I try and use a slightly darker marble mix, but it's a bit potluck. Let's put a little shadow under the eaves here. That always gives it a little bit more of a 3-dimensional shape. A bit fiddly, but looks good. And also some little planks. For that, I'm just using a roll of Van Dyke brown. Just touch it to the cabin. I just want to leave a little imprint. And finish off my corner. My cabin needs a door. I used the small blade of my knife just to scratch out some of that nice marble mix paint. I'll use a small roll of Van Dyke brown just to fill it in. Give it a nice dark look, like a little shadow. And to help it stand out, I'll put a tiny little bit of grubby white paint on the edge of my knife just to sort of create the illusion of a bit of a door frame. It really helps to define that detail. I deliberately under-highlighted my bushes. I kept them to a minimum. So now I have the cabin in place, I can go back and just add a little extra sparkle. Now I know I said don't go over them more than once, but sometimes, well, when you stand back you see a little chance of putting in a bit of an extra touch to a painting. And I'm going to add just a few extra sparklers around the base of the cabin as well. This helps settle it into my painting. Now for some nice frosty grass. I've laid my brush flat on my palette and see how I give it a little push. I drive the paint ahead of the bristles. This creates a little bit of a thicker edge of colour. And lay your brush at about 45 degrees to the canvas and gently tap. See, I build up this lovely texture. But I am saving a little bit of a shadow line at the base of the bushes. Follow the lay of the land. Build up the layers of frosty grass, one layer at a time, working from the top to the foreground. And save a little shadow and darkness here and there. It gives your painting depth and distance, and lots of extra detail. In that little shadow gap, I might add a few extra sparklers. And lastly, some little sticks and twigs. Don't forget to add those. I also use the edge of my knife to push up into the paint to create some little frosty reeds. So there we have it. Our most popular painted glass was Northern Lights. Or was it this one? We'll have to watch that one now and see for yourself.